Well, it only took 3 years for me to get the Ferrari invite in Gran Turismo 7, but finally we are here, and of course I bought a couple of Enzos, a couple of LaFerraris and an FXX K. I didn't really feel like I needed to buy 2 of these, and in hindsight I'm glad that I didn't, because there really would have been no point. For those who haven't had the opportunity to buy one of these, or maybe just haven't bothered dropping the 3.6 million credits needed to do so, are you missing out? Should you be looking to get it if you are other than maybe a completionist? So for me, for example, those 3 Ferraris were not only the 2 vehicles which I needed for the last collection books, but also the last 3 vehicles in the game which I needed to buy. So it's been great for me finally completing all of those things simultaneously, but the car is a victim, I would say, of polyphony's manufactured hype. The FXX K, much like the FXX before it, in my opinion a significantly better car in Gran Turismo, certainly if you compare what this can do to what that car could do, and to be fair I believe what that car could probably still do if it were brought back, the Enzo-based version. The car is put on a pedestal, much in the same way as the Veyron, the Carrera GT, and various other invite-only vehicles. It's basically the top level in the game. It's the only thing that's higher than Haggerty in terms of being difficult to get. And yes, luck of the draw means some will easily have it, but most of us don't get that lucky. The problem then with that is, by definition, you make the car seem special. There must be something interesting about it, something really good. You have to be a Ferrari superfan or whatever. And there's the problem. Problem number 1, as we've spoken about before, is that the invitations actually don't really mean anything in terms of your fandom. They're totally at random. You might not care less about Ferrari and you'll still have just as much of a chance of getting an invite as anyone else. So I do believe that moving forward, Polyphony definitely needs to restructure how this kind of stuff works. I've posited that the simplest, most direct way and most rewarding way to solve this problem is quite simply to do exactly what you were doing already, which is make really cool cars prize vehicles. What was the problem with doing that? I get that people these days apparently have no attention span, but for those of us who actually want to work towards something, well, make it feel like it's actually worth it. If you want to make something like an FXX K a prize-only vehicle, I would happily, race through a Ferrari-only championship in the dealership, Gran Turismo 4 style. Maybe it's really difficult. Make it a victory car for a Formula Gran Turismo championship. Whatever the case may be, it would be a more direct reward, a more meaningful one, and if you are a Ferrari fan, a Bugatti fan, a Porsche fan, you would be able to choose to go down that route instead of, as the engine swaps used to be, just blind luck, which is a really stupid way of doing it. In terms of what this car can do, if you haven't bought one already, there's really not a huge amount that you can change in terms of upgrades. You can't change the visuals, so if you are hoping for a crazy wide body, huge Pikes Peak wing, or turn it into a FXX K Evo, you can't. You can do a livery on it, of course, and you can change the wheels and the width, but that's literally it, aside from paint. In terms of power, weight, all of that kind of stuff, it's exactly the same as standard. The only thing which you can change is, of course, the point level, and interestingly, the points have changed a lot since the inception of the game, because back when the game first came out, or at least very soon after, one of the main things that I do is I make a list of all the cars that I'm going to talk about in reviews, and I note down all of their specs. The funny thing is, it really shows how much updates have changed the car, because now, if you check the Ferrari dealership, and even through updates still to come, this will probably change again, this is currently 780.99. So 781 points. When the game first came out, this was 808. Fairly significant difference in point level. And in practice, what you get is a really good curb weight, a little bit more than like a 2000 GT1 car at 1165 kilos. Of course, a lot of power, 1034, but then again, the LaFerrari isn't exactly underpowered in comparison, and that brings me to another slight issue. If you're looking for this kind of performance, well, the LaFerrari is cheaper, and you can make it roughly the same kind of level, certainly in terms of power, if not exceed it, if you do enough to it. And even the Enzo, as crazy as it sounds, not quite as powerful on the one hand, but you can make the Enzo lighter than this. In fact, you can make the Enzo weigh less than 1,000 kilos. If you're really looking for Ferrari hypercar performance, you might want to just go for the Enzo. And with a price tag of 3.6 million, which is one of the highest of any supercar or hypercar kind of machine, well, it kind of has to be good, unless you're just resting on the laurels of it being a Ferrari, which, let's be honest, is exactly what it is for the most part, because even the FXX used to be, 2 million in comparison, and I would say that car is absolutely worth that. In fact, if it came back, I'd happily pay 3 million for an FXX or an FXX Evo, because it's a brilliant car within Gran Turismo and extremely OP. In the case of this one, well, it shares some of those OP similarities categories, for example being considered a quote-unquote normal vehicle, so it doesn't have a group category assigned to it. That of course is a huge advantage in certain online events or career mode events, but realistically it's one of those cars where I think this vehicle feels more special when you can't do any tuning. See, an FXX K only works either in real life, wherein no individual Ferrari owner is going to try and build their own version. They'll just go to Ferrari and buy this because that's part of the club and the mentality. But in a game where you can make other cars have, 13, 14, 1500 horsepower in this kind of category, it just doesn't feel as special. And it's a similar problem to what vehicles like the Lamborghini Veneno or the Aston Martin Vulcan suffer from. In real life, tremendously quick cars and very desirable, but in the game they're just completely optional. You don't need a Vulcan in Gran Turismo, you don't need a Veneno. They're optional cars. You could do everything that they can do and then some by just saving all of that extra cash and just buying an Aston Martin Valkyrie, for example. Not to say that it's a bad car, it's just the problem of having this huge pedestal of an invite-only car with a huge price tag on it as well. And unfortunately, another problem which, as you can kind of tell, I keep referencing this, a big problem which the FXX K suffers from, and before I'd even driven it I knew this was going to be the case, is the FXX. That car simply existing naturally overshadows this one. With the FXX K, it feels like a very modern approach with all of the extra tech and the active aero, etc., versus the relatively analog approach of the FXX, but particularly within a game, and even more so a game like Gran Turismo, where you can make cars lighter, more powerful, adjust them, make them way quicker than they should be in many cases. This car just does not have an edge. You can use it to beat the AI all day long, but against real people, it doesn't feel necessary, and it certainly is not the quickest car of its kind in the game. You'd be better off with something like a Pagani Zonda R, and certainly with an Aston Martin Valkyrie. But yeah, it sounds more negative than I want it to come off, and that's entirely my point. This car doesn't deserve to have that kind of assessment, because within the right context, it's a brutal, awesome, stunning machine. It just doesn't really feel that way within the context of the game. But again, it's not something they couldn't fix, at least in part, in future. That's it for my thoughts on the FXX K, and of course stick around for more reviews and GT7 content in general. And for now, thanks for watching.